Maya Carter had never wanted to return to Briarwood, a town she barely remembered from childhood visits to her grandmother Evelyn's small house. But when Evelyn died, leaving behind a brass key and a note written in trembling cursive, "Go back to the house. It remembers what they made us forget," Maya felt a pull she could not resist. She drove the long, winding roads back to the decayed edge of town, where the Carter house loomed like a sleeping sentinel over its own secrets. The house was worse than she remembered. The siding had peeled, the shutters were crooked, and the roof sagged under the weight of decades of storms. Vines twisted around the porch posts, as though the house itself was trying to strangle the memories within. No neighbors spoke of it, and the occasional passerby crossed to the other side of the street. The town didn't want anyone to remember what had happened here. Maya parked her car and stepped out, the wind tugging at her coat. She hesitated at the gate, the brass key trembling in her hand. The moment she pushed open the front door, the air inside hit her with the damp, musty smell of decay. Dust rose in lazy clouds, and a cold draft brushed against her neck, carrying a whisper she could almost hear, though the house was silent. She had barely stepped inside when the floorboards creaked beneath her weight. A faint tapping echoed somewhere upstairs. She froze. It was deliberate. She followed it with her flashlight, tracing the sound down a narrow hallway lined with photographs, sepia-toned portraits of black families, men and women staring at her from decades past. They looked proud. They looked fearful. They looked like they had something to tell her, and she knew instinctively that they would. At the end of the hallway was a door she didn't remember. Small, wooden, carved with patterns that made her skin prickle. Something ancient, something familiar. She pushed it open. Inside, a wooden trunk sat against the far wall. Its surface was etched with African-inspired carvings. As her hand hovered over the latch, a voice, a whisper, passed through the room, "Open it." The trunk smelled of cedar and old paper. Inside were diaries, letters, maps, and photographs, evidence of a black community that had once thrived in Briarwood. The first diary belonged to her great-great-grandfather, Isaiah Carter. His handwriting was elegant and precise. She began to read. Isaiah wrote of a community born from necessity and courage. Families who had fled slavery and Reconstruction-era violence had settled here, creating a town built on resilience. They owned farms, ran shops, built schools and churches, and cultivated gardens that fed generations. Every page radiated pride, but with it came the undercurrent of danger, the constant fear that the world outside was always waiting to strike. Night riders have been seen near the creek, one entry read. Families threatened in their sleep. The sheriff says we are agitating by owning land. They want our farms. Maya's fingers trembled. The diary told of homes burned, livestock poisoned, children stalked. The entries became increasingly desperate. And then one line stopped her heart, "Tonight they burn the field's barn. We hear screams." The ink was smudged, as if someone had cried over it. She spent days combing through the trunk. There were letters from townspeople, church records, old maps marking the boundaries of farms that no longer existed. Every document added a layer to a story the town had tried to erase. Briarwood hadn't disappeared naturally. It had been destroyed, systematically, intentionally, and violently. One night, as Maya read by candlelight, the house seemed to awaken. The floorboards trembled, the walls groaned, and a low moan echoed through the empty rooms. Shadows appeared, stretching along the hallway. She saw them clearly, ghostly figures running through time, reliving the terror of a night long past. Women clutching children, men forming makeshift barricades, children crying. Flames crackled outside the spectral windows. Dark figures advanced, torches and rifles in hand, faceless, relentless. She watched the town's racial terror replay before her eyes. Maya gasped and stumbled back. The visions vanished, leaving only silence, heavy as tombstone granite. But the knowledge, the crime, the terror, was indelible. Briarwood had been destroyed because a thriving black community dared to exist in a world that would not let them. The next days were spent uncovering more truths. Maya found letters from local officials, who had written secret orders for eviction. Deeds had been stolen, falsified, and destroyed. Families had been forced out at gunpoint, threatened with death if they returned. Entire bloodlines scattered across states. Records were rewritten to erase every trace of their existence. But the house remembered. The Carter house remembered. One evening, the air turned ice-cold as Maya sifted through maps and letters. Figures appeared, translucent, pale, sorrowful. She recognized some from the photographs: Josephine Fields, the midwife, men and women she had read about in diaries. They surrounded her, whispering in unison, "Bring us justice. Speak what they buried. Restore what was stolen." Isaiah's spirit stepped forward, face etched with centuries of grief. "Our lives were taken. All we ask is that our names live again." Maya felt tears burn her cheeks. "I swear I will tell the world your story," she whispered. The spirits faded slowly, leaving only the weight of their expectation. Maya became an investigator of the past, tracing the threads the town had tried to sever. She contacted historians, archivists, genealogists, preservation societies. Descendants of Briarwood families came forward, confirming stories their grandparents had whispered. Town records were cross-referenced, archives opened, and the systematic destruction of the community was finally revealed to the light of day. With evidence in hand, Maya demanded accountability. Local governments had ignored Briarwood for decades, but now, with proof and descendants ready to testify, the town could no longer pretend the community had vanished. The Carter house was restored as a museum, a place of remembrance, education, and justice. Visitors came in thousands. Descendants returned to walk the land, journalists documented the truth, schools added the story of Briarwood to their local history curriculum. The once forgotten black community had finally been resurrected, their memory solidified in the public record. On the day the museum opened, Maya stood in the hall surrounded by portraits of the community she had brought back from oblivion. The wind swept through the house, brushing against her face like a caress. A whisper reached her ear, "You brought us home." Maya closed her eyes. "I didn't just remember you. I resurrected you." The Carter house exhaled a century of grief. No longer a house of mourning, it stood alive again, a monument to resilience, justice, and the hidden crimes of a town that tried to erase a people. And in the quiet that followed, Maya knew the work was not finished. Every diary, letter, and photograph was now evidence, a testimony to the lives stolen. The investigation had just begun, and the ghosts of Briarwood would guide her every step of the way.